Welcome to the work table, guys. Like I mentioned earlier, we'll be working on basic bodice pattern in this tutorial today. And right here I have my pattern paper affixed on my work table. I have my measurements, the measurements I'm going to be working with today, my tape roll, scissors, marker, ruler, and yes, of course, my French comb. So in today's tutorial, this is the measurements I'll be working with: the shoulder measurements, the bust, waist, hip, armhole, and the bodice length, as well as the nipple to nipple point, also known as the bust pan measurements. So the shoulder measurement is usually divided into two, while the rest of the circumference measurement is divided into four. However, the armhole measurement can be measured directly. The depth of the armhole can be measured directly on the body, while it can also be deduced from this formula whereby you divide your bust measurements by 6, your bust circumference measurements by 6, and then you add 1.5 inches to that measurement. That gives you your armhole measurements. So I have done all the calculations here. I've divided the bust measurements, the waist measurements, and the hip measurements. So let's get right into the video. So the bust point I'm working with is 9 inches. That's 9 there. The waist is 16, and then the hip line vertical measurement is 24. So all these points, I'm going to be drawing out all the vertical lines like so. I haven't done that. I will be placing my neck measurement. So for this tutorial, the neck width I'll be working with is 3 inches, and I'll be working with neck depth of 4 inches. So I'm just going to make sure that this 3 inches is right here as well. Okay, and I also have 4 inches directly here. So these 2 points will be joined together. And I'm going to join this as well. So to bring out the neckline completely, I'm just going to draw a diagonal line here for a sharp end point, and this makes it much more easier to draft out the neckline. So I'm going to measure what I have here. This is 5 inches, so I'm going to divide that by 2. That's 2.5 inches, and right from the 2.5 inches I'll go down by 1.5 inches here, and I'll use my French curve to create a perfect neckline. There we go. The neckline is just right there. So the next thing to do is to insert my shoulder slope, and to insert my shoulder slope I'm going to have to impute the shoulder measurements that I'm working with. The shoulder measurement is 16 divided by 2, that's 8. So I'm going to insert 8 inches here, and from this 8 inches, the shoulder slope depends on how wide or how broad the client's shoulder is. So on the average we do 1 inch lower. So from this point here I'm going to connect it to this to create the shoulder slope. Yeah, right. I haven't created the shoulder slope. Now I need to impute my armhole measurements. So the armhole measurement I have is, as I have calculated earlier, is 7.5. So 7.5 is somewhere around here, and I'm just going to draw that line out. And right here at this point, then I'm going to join these two lines together. This would give us way through to get a perfect armhole. So I haven't done this. The next thing is to create the curve. So from this 7.5, I'm going to divide it by 2 and get the midpoint. 7.5 divided by 2 would give us 3.75, and that's somewhere around here. So from this point, I'll go in by 0.75 rather, 0.75 inch. That's about an inch, but you don't need up to 1 inch. 0.75, and then I would connect the 0.75 to this to the armhole depth there. So with the use of my French curve, I just want to connect these together. curve it out, and that's it. So this is for the front armhole. For the back armhole, because I'm going to be placing this pattern right on a plain pattern paper to draft the front, to draft the back armhole rather. So for the back armhole, you do not need to come in by any inch. You just follow the same initial line that was here before, and then you create your curve. Without a French curve, you can easily come up by 0.75, just like I have here, and then you connect the curve. Just so you have the same curve line in the end there while cutting on your fabric, and that's it. So moving forward, I'd also like to insert the back neckline, still working with the same neck width but different neck depth. So this back neckline is basically to your preference as you want it, but for the sake of this tutorial, I'll be doing 2 inches. So from here I'll mark 2 inches, and then I'll connect it together. Connect a mild curve, or rather I'll follow the same route I did there, and then about this much depth inward. I'm going to curve it just to get a curve. So this is the back neckline, and this is the front neckline that I am working with. Now to the rest of the measurements, I'm going to be obtaining my waist dart, and together I need my bust span measurement, and the bust span measurement I'm working with is 8 inches. So 8 inches divided by 2 is 4. So I'm going to place that 4 inch right here all the way down and to the hip line. So let's label so we know which line they are: waistline and the hip line. Well, this first line here serves as the chest line. So I have 4 inches all through. So from the bust line, right at that 4 inches point that we measured, you're going to come down by 1 inch, and on the hip line you're going to come up by 2 inches. So use your ruler to connect these 3 points together. I haven't done that. Now we're going to pick ½ inch on both sides of this line, this dart line on the waistline. So ½ inch on both sides, and this ½ inch will be connected to this point here, 1, 2, and that would give us that line. So right here is our that leg. So now we can impute every other measurement that we took earlier. So from the chest line, I'm going to impute the bust measurement, which I have divided by 4, and I've added 1 inch as seam allowance. You can add as much as you want for your seam allowance. So the bust measurements I have there is 10 inches. So I'm just going to insert that 10 inches here. And I'm going to do the same here as well, the original bust line. So the waist measurement I have there is 9 inches. But don't forget that we've added 1 inch. We've taken 1 inch rather for that measurement. So you need to consider this 1 inch and add it back to your waistline so you can have enough for your seam allowance. So I have 9 inches here. And on the waistline I have 11.5 inches. So this is basically our measurement. But because this is the hip part, you do not really want it to be so sharp, so you can just curve it out like so. The chest line to the waistline, because I want to insert a bust dart on this pattern. So from this, I'm just going to measure what I have here. So from the chest line to the waistline, I have 8 inches, and I'm going to divide that by 2, and that will give me 4 inches. So at this 4 inches here, don't forget we have our bust part measurement as 4 inches. So you are going to come out by 1 inch from the bust measurement here. It goes out like this, and then you are going to connect. You're going to connect that line like so. And now that you have connected that line, so from each side you take ½ inch on both sides, and then you connect it to form the darts to this point here. You connect it to this point here, and then you form the darts, the bust dart leg. This has more shape to the bust area, so the dress just doesn't come off as plain, so plain like that. So before cutting out this pattern, because we're pretty much done with the front bodice, you're going to need to extend that leg here, because by the time you cut out and you want to fold, it will come up tightened and you might be short of fabric from that end. So at this point, you come out by ½ inch at this very point here, and then you just make a simple line there. This would help you to have enough fabric to work with at the side. That leg here for the bust, the length of the dress will be reduced by 1 inch because it is just 1 inch that we picked here, so we need to add it back to this point. So we're going to add that 1 inch down here, and then we'll just curve it up to this point where we have our bust band measurements marked out, and then we extend this line to form our proper hip line. This way, by the time you pick this, you have enough to go around and then it will be equal. So you do not necessarily have to make it this sharp, but just blend it in. Blend it in. And yes, so I'm just going to cut it out now. So remember, before you cut off this part, first cut out the back armhole line and the back neckline. So by the time you place it on the back basic bodice pattern paper, you'll be able to trace out not so much, and you have your exact measurements for the back pattern. There we go. And yes, our front basic block is ready. Here we have our front basic block. So I'm going to be placing this on a fresh pattern paper to make the back basic that we have here. Note that the back pattern would not have a bust dart. So because of the dart we have here, and we extended the length at the end here, we're going to fold this in. So we would have our original length at the hip line, and then we're good to go like this. I'm just going to hold it down there. So you can trace it out or just cut out as deem fit. So I'm just going to cut it out like that. And at this point, if you do wish to add your zip seam allowance, you can, and if you don't, you can add it on your pattern paper, on your fabric rather, while cutting out on your main fabric, so you can still add it on there as well. So here I'm just going to cut out it out, and this is what I have, and I'm just going to point out parts where I have my notches on the exact line, down here, here, and the hip line, of course, at the back. So before I move on, I might as well just cut out the front armhole now. then the front neckline. So that I have here, I already made a trace out there, so it's just to right here, and then to create the darts for the back bodice, I'm just going to do the same thing we did for the front bodice. So pick the bust pan of waist dart and we're good to go. And if you so wish, you can still connect this middle line. Sometimes it's not necessary, but for alignment's sake,